Welcome, pilots! So I haven't typically followed the news from the EVE Online website as closely as I perhaps should, but I came across this article that discusses some of the presentations held during the recent FanFest gathering. There's a lot to look into here for pilots engaged in factional warfare in particular. But for those of us who spend most of our EVE time with PvE, there's a section here about something they're calling narrative arcs that I thought I'd discuss a little. So here's what they're saying. New narrative arcs are being introduced to EVE. Each arc will tell a cohesive story in which you play an important role in helping decide the outcome. Each arc features a steady stream of narrative-driven events and content that ultimately leads you to a climactic moment that reveals a significant change to New Eden. To deliver the absolute best arcs possible, we've been taking a new approach of narrative-driven design. It's a method shaped to deliver more moments where you take part in a story unfolding on a grand scale that leaves permanent marks on New Eden. That means your decisions, actions, and allegiances help determine the outcome. Many new features will be introduced through narrative arcs too, with some focused on bringing you a more meaningful sense of belonging to your faction. In other words, arcs do more to make you an important part of the future of New Eden. So some of the existing arcs, like Syndication for example, essentially just have a branch where you decide to play one set of missions over the other. By the end, the only real impact is for the individual character. Which missions did you run? What solar systems did you have to visit? Did you have to go through low security space or not? And what was the end reward? The way they're describing narrative arcs makes it sound like the events that unfold should have an impact on the lore of the game. I'll be very curious to see what this actually means, because I have a hard time envisioning how they can achieve this unless there's a dedicated team who'll be adapting the story based on what players do over time. Will this mean that one pilot who begins the arc in, say, January 2023 could have a vastly different experience than a pilot who begins it months later in April 2023? It sounds much more grandiose than I would have expected, but I guess we'll see when it actually gets released. The sort of PvE content I've always hoped for would be a little less grand, but more locally dynamic. Most of the combat sites we have today are almost completely static. There's a set look and feel, a set number of spawns with some minor variations, and a random drop from a set loot table, or a random chance to escalate to another static site. Even the event sites we've been getting, while they're a welcome addition, I really did enjoy the Interstellar Convergence event, for example. They're mostly just harder versions of combat sites where the NPCs overwhelm you with electronic warfare. Imagine you come across a combat site called, say, a Serpentis Smuggler Outpost. In the site, the Serpentis would actually be trying to achieve something. They're using the outpost to stage hit-and-run attacks on NPC transport ships in the system, or even in the constellation. So while the site is still active, you might happen across Serpentis actively attacking transport ships near stations, asteroid fields, planets, whatever. As a player, you could choose to avoid running the site, instead targeting the hit-and-run teams in the hopes one of them drops a faction module. Or you could run the site, destroying the outpost and gathering whatever they accumulated. And maybe getting loyalty points with Concord or another corporation if you choose to turn over the loot. But maybe while running the site, there could also be an opportunity where some of the ships try to escape. If you manage to stop them, there's a good chance they have faction loot and you've put an end to their local operation. If you don't stop them, maybe they manage to relocate their operation and the site escalates somewhat similar to the way unrated combat sites do today. Just, to something that feels more dynamic and less static than existing combat sites. So that's the sort of thing I've always hoped for in the future of EVE Online. I'll certainly be trying out the narrative arcs when they're released, but I actually feel like the sort of content I've just described would be easier to design and implement in the game, require less ongoing resources, and really serve to make PvE in the game feel more alive. So that's it for my commentary for now. I have plenty of EVE Online content on this channel, and will be continuing to build my library of video guides for combat and exploration sites. In fact, I've decided that this channel in particular will stay focused on EVE Online content. If you're interested in what else I might be up to, I just started a separate channel called Riley Entertainment Satire. Check it out if you want a taste of my zany sense of humor. Thanks to all of you who've been watching my videos and subscribing to the channel. There's lots more to come in the coming weeks and months.